Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karen. With me to discuss the latest in the Donald Trump administration, Miles Taylor, better known as Anonymous. Your anonymity gives you away, Miles, I got to tell you.
There's a lot of days lately where I wish I still was.
Yeah, well, I always say when I walk into the White House, welcome back to the soup. It just, there's no other, it's a broth.
That's
Um,
right.
So the thing I wanted to talk about, you having been on the inside of his first administration for a while, the latest, well, let's just say it was probably I have never seen anything like it before. It wasn't unusual for South Park. I mean, we've seen Satan and Jesus in South Park before, and it's not even the first time in South Park that Satan had a gay relationship with a head of state. But nonetheless, this was Donald.
That's how you know you've been on the air for a really long time.
Yeah, that's
Is when Satan has gone through multiple gay lovers. Your
right.
show's been around for a while.
That's and Jesus too.
Yeah.
But all that said, I mean, this is a very pointed, satirical look at the Donald Trump administration, and to put it into context, um, Trump settled a lawsuit with Paramount, and then okayed a sale of Paramount. Quid pro quo, anybody? And on Tuesday, Trey Parker and Matt Stone announced that they had, and with Paramount, a $1.25 billion deal to bring 27 seasons of South Park back to Paramount and have it stream there. Then the very next day, they, they, they dropped this bomb, which seemed to be a giant middle finger to both Paramount and the president. Paramount for settling with the president a lawsuit, on 60 Minutes based on an interview that was absolutely nuts. I wouldn't settle it. I would have gone to Discovery, but nonetheless, all of that. It's the largest bit of satire we've seen. The first time in a while we've seen anybody stand up directly to the president, almost daring him to do something. And so far, and I mean, we just got out of a gaggle, chopper talk before he headed off to Scotland. So far, no one's asked, and he has never offered any public information about this satire. His administration has said that Trey Parker and Matt Stone are dilapidated and beyond repair, but Donald Trump hadn't said one thing, and he had plenty of reporters who had an opportunity to ask him something today, but most of them said how they agreed with him on economics. So we'll go.
I think it happens on the plane. I mean, I think one of these reporters is going to ask when he inevitably goes back and starts chatting with the press pool, and it's eating him up inside because he's so thin-skinned. But taking two steps back, Brian, I'll just say I do think this is quite a moment for the satirical creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And, I'm not a South Park fan. Of course, have peripherally followed the show for its last 2+ decades on television. But the timing here of what they've done is so powerful. And once I heard the backstory, it became even more remarkable to me because if you watched clips from this episode, and even if you didn't, and you heard about it on social media, it was clear it was a really biting commentary, not just on Donald Trump's second administration, not just on his sweeping revenge campaign, not just on the crackdown against free speech, but also on his efforts to try to intimidate the political opposition. I mean, it's just there were a lot of layers to this show. But then when you find out that the creators did this in 3 days,
Yeah,
it's really fucking impressive. And in fact, you don't have to like the type of comedy that they do. And you can still be incredibly impressed that in 3 days they cobbled together this very potent, and in my view, quite hilarious satire of Donald Trump, but also, as you note, a deep criticism of Paramount, the company that just bought their show, that has capitulated to Donald Trump effectively, as some have argued, bribed him with this 60 Minutes
Yeah.
settlement to make the merger go through. That to me makes it all the more remarkable. And Trey Parker and Matt Stone likely should be in the running for dissenters of the year for what they've pulled off with this. It was timely, it was funny, it was crass, and again, more than anything, I think it put into sharp relief the popular dissatisfaction and concern about this twice impeached, many times indicted second term commander in chief.
Well, yeah, and I go back to, I mean, they certainly exposed his shortcomings in this particular episode. But what I give to him is this, and that's why I wanted your insight particularly on this. I thought, hell, I thought me and Jim Acosta, April Ryan, some of the reporters who stood up to him during the first administration, I thought, man, we're sticking it to the man. I'm standing up. I'm not going to sit down. I'm going to ask the question. Screw him. He's there to answer my questions. They took a half-hour show, and I tip my cap to them. I turn over my badassery to them because it was. I make no claims but they really did stick it to him. And you said it's something that he is thin-skinned. I've seen that. I've seen him yell at people, myself included, simply because of a turn of a phrase, or because one time I saw him screaming at Rance Priebus in the Oval Office because he didn't like where the thermostat was set. I mean, he's notoriously thin-skinned. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't. So where do you think? What do you think's going on right now with him and his staff?
Yeah, he's furious about it. There's no question. I mean, and in fact, the statement that the White House put out yesterday, folks should go back and review it because it was undoubtedly written by him, or at least with him. Because on an issue like this, on something that's a personal affront to the president, the press secretary would never be able to put it out without him. And so the White House
Right.
press office put out this statement that called the South Park creators, derided them, as you noted, and said it was a fourth-rate show, and sort of bizarrely referenced that Donald Trump was on a, quote, hot streak,
Mm-hmm.
which is so his terminology and not the terminology of the
Yeah.
Gen Zers working in his press office. And when I saw those words, I thought, okay, yeah, he had the Sharpie out and they took this press statement into him. So if Donald Trump doesn't officially say something, well, to me, it doesn't matter because he did. And that White House
Right.
statement behind the scenes would have been edited by him. But there's something more significant than just, how a show like this might get under his skin. It's that things like this stay under his skin and affect his psyche. They really do. And that's why groups like the Lincoln Project in their heyday were so successful, is because Donald Trump is a very simple person, and a simple schoolyard insult will stick with him for a very long time. Those things don't roll off him, and they affect his behavior. They lead him to project and lash out, to say things that undercut his own narratives, and he starts to tie himself in knots and trip over his shoelaces. And so, that's what I think, we're likely to see here is, in some way, shape, or form, his anger will transfer into actions that are hopefully, I would think, for critics of the president, self-defeating. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he reached out to the current owners at Paramount to express his anger at the deal, and thinking he got not as good of a deal as he wanted, now that their talent, from Stephen Colbert to South Park, are laying waste to the president's reputation, cognitively and otherwise.
Well, let me. I almost. I mean, I can imagine what it's like right now, being on the helicopter with Donald Trump, or being on Air Force One and being on the staff. And I point to a couple things that we've already discussed. One, you said, when he says, I always find what he says as deflection, and oftentimes representative of his own demise and his own problems. So when he says Trey Parker and Matt Stone are desperate and are fourth rate, I kind of look at that as he's looking in the mirror, screaming at himself that he's desperate and forthright. And I certainly think he's desperate enough in this situation. It certainly has angered a lot of people. But to your point, also, there was something that James Carville told me, and he's said it many times, but he said if what had happened with Paramount and the president, it happened in a back alley, you would call it a bribe. If it happens in court, it's a settlement. So he did take this deal thinking he had squelched a problem, and of course, Carr, the head of the FCC, was happy about what happened, and he said, you all are going to now start doing things the right way, and they said they're going to quit DEI hires, and they were going to be fairer, and they weren't going to be the liberal journalists that they were before. Well, that's kind of frightening, and it's selling of its independence. But more to the point, all of this deflects from what this is really about, I think, and that's the fact that he doesn't want people to talk about him and Jeff Epstein.
I think that's right. Well, on the first portion, Brian, I would say that, like a lot of policy making inside the Trump administration, there has been, with their attacks on CBS and Paramount, a failure to anticipate the secondary consequences. This always happens with Trump. Is folks perceive on his side that he's so deeply strategic and playing four-dimensional chess. He's not. He's never thinking about the secondary or the tertiary consequences.
He's sliding on the seat of his pants. Always.
That's right. And so, incredibly, what they've done here is turn, Paramount and by extension CBS from a administration maligned entity that they are trying to silence and trying to cow to, if not follow the president's agenda, be less critical of the president's agenda. And they've now inadvertently turned it into what I would predict is going to become the hub of some of the best satire and administration criticism for the next 3.5 years, because the talent inside this corporate entity refuses to be muzzled. And it's a mistake that Trump made. It's a mistake that the Paramount leadership made in thinking that, these folks that they have on television are just going to willingly accept the muzzle. I mean, this as a journalist who has spoken out. Journalists live for these types of moments because they believe in their bones in the First Amendment, in the right to free speech, and any suggestion that one man might unilaterally be able to curtail that right is so anathema to what took them into that profession that they are not going to shirk from the opportunity to go push back against it. And I think we're going to keep seeing this over there. And look, from an entertainment perspective, I think it's going to be pretty fun to watch.
Well, I wonder what the next episode of South Park is going to be like.
Well, look, if people didn't see it, one of the funniest things about this episode that they produced in just a matter of days is that they mocked the reported settlement that Paramount reached, which allegedly, and this is according to Trump, included a side deal, not just the $16 million settlement from the CBS 60 Minutes lawsuit, but a side deal from Paramount's owners to give the president, I don't know, a 7 or 8 figure, spend on PSAs to support the administration's agenda and conservative causes, which people are rightfully even more frustrated about, that there was this dark of night secret side deal to further get Trump to approve the merger. And so what the South Park creators did was they ended their episode with this hilarious, true to life public service announcement about Donald Trump. I won't play the whole thing. I just want to play a couple seconds of the beginning because it's rich.
Go for it.
Who walked through the desert for you? Who survived the wilderness and gave the ultimate sacrifice? When things heat up, who will deliver us from temptation? Donald J. Trump.
And what they have there, Brian, for folks who don't want to watch the video and just want to know what they're missing out on, is they have a realistic, lifelike, AI-generated Donald Trump taking his clothes off in the desert.
Done.
and then nakedly crawling across the desert floor in this just sort of humiliating fashion with his less than toned body. And yeah, and I think it was very well done, and it was very funny, and it ends.
Exposing
Uh,
all of his
that's
shortcomings.
right. It
As
exposes his shortcomings by the end of the video. But it was. I think we are going to see some one-upmanship among comedians to level more biting satire against this administration. And you know what? If you go look at fights against autocrats throughout the 20th century, some of the most effective have not
humor.
been the self-serious, protesters. It's been humor, and
Yeah, John Lennon
that
said that
works.
if you fight them, they're prepared for that. Physical fight, anger, they're prepared for. But if you flick their finger at their beard with a laugh, they're not prepared for humor, and that's the one thing that the autocrats can handle. So but I got to tell you that particular PSA and to your point, in 3 days put this together. But it worked on several levels. First of all, there was the walking across the desert, sacrificing for you. It was the was the nod to the Christians who say that Donald Trump is an emissary of Jesus. The fact that he ended up stripping himself naked, the emperor has no clothes. I mean, they took it down to the point where and I will spoil it. I mean,
Spoil it.
it's his small penis speaking at the end saying he endorses this announcement and he is Donald J. Trump on so many levels. That is leveling for Donnie. And I still think today asking about the same issue, asking about Jeffrey Epstein, which is where all of this started. And the thing is, this is a self-inflicted wound. Nobody said Donald had to talk about Jeff Epstein. I mean, people had pretty much, that was back in the way back on the back burner. He brought it forward, so it's a self-inflicted wound. And at the same time, he's saying, don't look at me. You should be looking at Clinton and, of course, at Obama. And Tulsi Gabbard says that Obama is guilty of treason. Well, that's not true. We weren't at war and he didn't do anything. So I don't know what the hell she's talking about as far as treason goes. But to the point, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that when they take official actions, the President of the United States has unlimited immunity. So what the hell is she going to do to Obama or Clinton or Biden?
Well, you know what? I do think some of it gets worse. Now, Trump did say before he flew out today that, in his words, Obama owes him a big thank you
Yes, he does.
because
Yeah,
of
he
the
did say
Supreme
that.
Court's immunity decision, which clearly is something that's only occurred to Trump in the past 48 hours since he's leveled these threats of treason. Someone somewhere told him, we're going to have a hard time putting your predecessor behind bars because that same Supreme Court decision that protects you protects him. And yet, I think that Trump won't let it go. And he wants to see Obama officials suffer. And that's
That
why
he
we
said
saw
today.
this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw this week the Justice Department announced a quote unquote strike force to go investigate these former officials. And I think that they will. And even if they don't find anything, even if there are no crimes to charge these people with, which there are not, because the stone has been turned over so many times, it's probably going to become a diamond
Yeah.
on the Russia issue. But that doesn't mean they won't force Obama officials to lawyer up and put them through depositions and make their lives miserable for the next 3.5 years. And, I think we could see that happening. And similarly, I think the way that the Epstein issue is kept alive by Trump is not just because he keeps shooting himself in the foot when it comes to these revelations and an attempted cover-up, but he is going to want to turn the crosshairs on his political enemies. So if Bill
Yeah.
Clinton is indeed mentioned more often in the files, if other Democrats are mentioned more often in the files, I think he pressures the Justice Department to reopen the Epstein investigation, to put heat on those individuals as a way of somehow absolving him of criticism. I can see that happening, and you're already seeing that with conversations about subpoenaing the Clintons on Capitol Hill, and Trump wanting those aspects released. And of course, their ongoing multi-day conversations with Trump or Epstein associate, Maxwell. This is not going to go away. And I think Trump has realized it's not going to go away. And so his solution is, well, then how do I train the fire on someone else?
Unfortunately, I think that if they reopen the investigation, I think he often forgets that if you're spewing fire, it's going to get hot for you too. I think he doesn't understand that that could come back and blow back in his face. He's obviously never stood in front of a pizza oven or a blast furnace, but that's, I'm just saying. And Tulsi Gabbard coming out and saying that there's new evidence that eluded 4 previous investigations. I find that problematic as well, because one of the things is Marco Rubio signed off on reports that scrutinized this stuff, and so it at the end of the day was he involved? Is it, if you're alleging a conspiracy, you'd have to allege that Marco Rubio is involved in it because he signed off on the stuff. So I find it'll all fly back in their face. And to your point, I don't think I get tired of people saying he's playing 4 and 5 dimensional chess. He's playing one dimensional checkers. He's lucky if he can figure out how to jump king me, I'm crowned. He has no clue how to move, but he does luck out quite a bit.
Well, and it may feel like the midterm elections are far away, but really a lot of that begins at the end of this year. Is a lot of candidates out there campaigning and primaries, and a lot of that activity is going to heat up later this year. And these things related to Epstein, they won't be resolved by the end of the year. There's still going to be lawsuits and filings and depositions, and a lot of different things are going to happen that are going to carry this into next year. And this harms the president and Republicans, I think, in 2 ways. One is it really harms them and their candidates in the primary process because, MAGA's upset, and there are folks that are going to be running for office that weren't planning on running for office a couple months ago because they think that Trump has let them down. So they're going to face internal challenges, and then they're going to face headwinds in the midterm elections. I mean, I think the numbers that I saw this week were something like 27. Trump's approval rating among independents is something like 27%. It is incredibly low. It might have been even lower than that, but that puts him in a really, really difficult spot as he is out there trying to back people in these down ballot races to make sure he doesn't lose one or both houses of Congress, because he knows the back end of his presidency will be consumed by investigations into him if that happens. And so the more he prolongs this conversation, the more likely I think he makes it that happens.
As we come to a closer today, I know you have to take off. I'd like to ask you one final question. I've heard all kinds of speculation about Trey Parker and Matt Stone and what's going to happen to South Park, with some colleagues of mine in the White House press corps saying they're going to get canceled. There'll never be another episode of South Park. What say you to that?
Discipline and trust in God. He survived the desert.
With discipline and trust in God, I think they'll survive the desert. Look, commercially, I think they made a really smart play here. Everyone in the news media is talking about South Park again for the first time in a long time. The creators in the past day have said, this season is not going to be all about politics. And I think they realize, it might be smart to let this speak for itself for a little while. But the temptation is going to be so great to come back to the well on this one that I suspect they will keep poking their corporate parent. And these big corporations, they really, really have a tough time when they wade into politics. And I think Paramount is going to find itself, not just with South Park, but Colbert and others and 60 Minutes. They're going to find themselves with a multi-year headache. And they're going to be forced at some point again, unfortunately, to feed the alligator, because this is what happens. You keep feeding the alligator, it keeps coming back, and eventually it eats you. So I would not say that Trump has settled with Paramount. I would say he has only settled with them for now.
And I'll say this. I'll look at it this way. I saw that PSA at the end of the show, and if you looked at the slate for the fake PSA, it said 1 of 50.
1 of 50. One
I'm
of
waiting for
50.
2, 3. I want to see 50 of 50, by God.
That's
And
right.
if I get a chance to interview Matt and Trey at Comic Con this weekend, I'm going to ask them that. When are we going to see the next 49?
That was their warning for sure. Brian, great to be with you as always, my friend.
Miles, it's always a pleasure. You're welcome back anytime, brother. Love having you.
Cool. Thank you. Have a great time.
You too.